day today to everyone. It is our 70th anniversary today. Today's webinar will focus on the global challenges and opportunities of regeneration and redevelopment. Admittingly, it's not a very handy title, my apologies, but this webinar forms part of a series of events for this year's World Town and Planning Day on Home Start with Planning. As you're probably aware, housing is quite a theme at the moment. The World Urban Forum is also taking place in Cairo this week with a focus on housing. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Royal Town Planning Institute, including members from the RTPI Yorkshire and RTPI Southwest. My name is Philip Chaffel-Solenker, and I'm a committee member of the RTPI Yorkshire, and I'm also chair of our international group at the RTPI Yorkshire. In today's event, we will explore how we can achieve regeneration through the delivery of housing and how the interplay between the two works. To do so, we have some excellent speakers lined up from Stantec, the Canadian Planning Association, the University of Liverpool, and Leeds City Council. In order to keep my introduction short, I will only briefly introduce today's speakers. Our first speaker will be Dr. Tom Moore. He is a senior lecturer in the Department of Geography and Planning at the University of Liverpool, UK. He has researched community-led housing models in England since 2007, exploring their growth and development through local case studies, project and funding evaluations, and international comparisons. In addition, Tom is interested in the opportunities and limitations of models that rely on citizen leadership and participation. He undertakes research on a range of issues related to community planning and housing policy and inequality. Our second speakers are Valentina Zanoni and Simone Gober, both from Stantec and the Engineering, Architecture and Environmental Consultancy, who will be presenting on the ARIA project in Milan, Italy. Valentina is creative director of the architecture services of Stantec in Italy, and project director of ARIA, Italy's biggest social housing urban regeneration project. Simone is an urban regeneration and community development expert with over 20 years of experience in developing sustainable communities in the UK and overseas. Our third speaker is Adam Brennan. We will hear from Adam, who is head of regeneration at Leeds City Council. Adam is an experienced senior public sector leader and chartered town planner with a strong track record of delivery in housing, property, infrastructure, planning, and neighborhood regeneration. Adam will provide insights of the regeneration of city of Leeds. And finally, we've got Hugh Nguyen. She will talk about a case study in the project of Ottawa. Hugh is a Canadian professional planner with over 15 years of experience in municipal planning, design and construction, and city building project. She is based in Ottawa, Canada, and is a senior planner with the Federal Crown Agency, the National Capital Commission, where she has worked on the development of the Le Breton Flats master concept plan and now on its implementation. Just to note before we start, this session will last for 90 minutes and will be recorded. After this session, you will all receive a link to rewatch the webinar and to be asked to complete a survey. In terms of the structure of the session, each of our speakers will give a brief talk reflecting of their research and/or professional experience regarding regeneration and housing. This will be followed by a question and answer session. Please post your questions in the Q&A box at any time throughout the presentations. You can find the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen, where you also can vote on questions. And we will collect all questions and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. But now I'm handing over to our first speaker. Thank you very much. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you for the invitation to speak today and to contribute to a really interesting and diverse set of presentations that are going to consider how we deliver regeneration in different forms and fashions. So I've been asked to speak today around the use of community land trusts, a form of citizen and community participation, and to introduce those as an alternative method of delivering regeneration from the bottom up, from the grassroots, from communities themselves that are affected by regeneration initiatives and for whom we often deliver regeneration for. So in the next sort of 15 minutes or so, I'm going to briefly introduce to you what a community land trust is. We're going to talk about some of the rationales behind them. Why do we have this form of citizen and community-led organisation? I'll briefly reflect on what they kind of offer to housing and regeneration, as well as some of their opportunities and challenges. I should say I'm going to be talking today primarily in an English context. So I'm a researcher based at an English university. I have, and that's been the kind of primary focus for my studies. I have done some kind of global comparison of these initiatives as well, as I'll allude to. They do exist globally, nationwide, in many different countries. And some of the themes are kind of shared, but much of what I will talk about will be related to the context in which I've been working. So what are community land trusts, or CLTs, as we may shorten them to? They are democratic non-profit organisations that own and develop land for the benefit of a defined community. That could be a community of place, a geographic community, but also a community of identity. They're very much kind of voluntary led, began by grassroots kind of local people who are responding to issues or concerns they have about urban development in their local neighbourhoods. So although they're kind of voluntary led, they are formal organizations that become legally incorporated and are then obviously subject to kind of forms of regulation as well. And they are essentially a model of kind of collective land ownership, which tries to provide affordable housing, but also other community amenities and facilities too, for the benefit of a kind of defined community or group of people. And there's a really strong emphasis on kind of local community benefit. They're part of a broader suite of kind of community-led or collaborative housing and regeneration models that imply high degrees of resident participation in planning, development, and ongoing management and ownership. Many of you will be familiar with the kind of long history of housing cooperatives, for example, in many parts of the world. And CLTs, although they are in some countries a more recent development, are very much inspired by that broader, longer kind of history. So just to kind of expand that kind of a technical definition, I suppose. What are they and how are they distinct from other kind of forms of housing and regeneration approaches? So CLTs, formed and managed by community members, essentially form an organization, and then they seek to acquire land in their community, usually through purchase or from transfer from public authorities. And really, the land is kind of the central point here. So once that land is in the community ownership, they basically restrict that to and put in place kind of mechanisms to restrict and control the use of that land in the future. So once that land is in ownership, they will build upon that land in partnership with relevant professionals. There may be sort of community self-build initiatives, but also working with relevant professionals, architects, planners, other built environment professionals that can help facilitate housing and regeneration and development. Homes that CLTs built are then kind of subject to ongoing restrictions on the price at which they can be sold or rented. So restrictions are put in place essentially to make sure that housing remains affordable in perpetuity. So it can't be speculated upon in the private market. There's a really strong emphasis on community governance, as I've mentioned, valorizing and really foregrounding resident and participation and control. I think an important point here before we move on is that these initiatives do not occur in isolation from a broader kind of professional framework. There are regional, local, and indeed international infrastructure bodies specializing in community land trusts that support the growth of these community-led voluntary initiatives. For instance, in recent years, a European community land trust network was formed, and that actually promotes and lobbies for favourable policies for community land trusts at a European level. Similarly, there are ones operating at more regional city levels that are much more, working much more closely with communities. As I mentioned, these are kind of, although I'm going to talk in the following slides about an English context, these are very much kind of entities that are found globally. So the origins of CLTs actually can be found in the United States, dating back to the civil rights movement in the 1960s, where they developed essentially to try and tackle racial inequalities in housing and land ownership. That's actually a typo on the slide. That should say that CLTs in the USA provide around 30,000 homes. The model has been kind of transferred and adapted from the United States to other countries, particularly in the last 15 years or so, responding to some of the kind of global pressures that we face in urban environments, housing financialization, privatization, the growth of kind of neoliberal policymaking, and the kind of the difficulties with housing affordability and access. But the adaptation in different countries is very different and very unique as well. So you can see here we have CLT expressions, models emerging in parts of Europe, and there are very distinct differences between those that are emerging in Central and Southeastern Europe versus those in Western Europe, reflecting local cultural contexts, as well as Latin America and South America, as well as parts of North America as well. So why do we have community land trusts? Why do they exist? I think there's a number of different kind of cross-cutting areas here, many of which, although I'm speaking in an English context, probably do apply to other areas as well. First is obviously the pressing challenges with housing affordability and financialization. Housing is extremely unaffordable in many urban contexts. Many households face great difficulties in accessing home ownership or paying affordable rents. And the ability, I suppose, the right to a home, right? You know, the kind of the ability to access an affordable, secure home in a place that you want to live is becoming much more difficult for many people. So hence CLT's emphasis on kind of perpetual, ongoing affordability, preventing homes from the kind of speculation in the private, preventing homes from being speculated upon in the private market. And so in essence, these are kind of, global challenges that confront local communities on a day-to-day basis. So this is very much a kind of response to some of those drivers and forces. Another aspect is a kind of a lack of community agency and disempowerment experienced by many communities in the planning, management and ownership of housing and land. Although most advanced economies do have structures that encourage and facilitate community participation, in some communities, particularly where they may have been subject to unwanted regeneration or redevelopment pressures or drivers, some communities do sometimes express that they experience disempowerment and a lack of agency in the decisions that affect their neighborhoods. So CLTs are often kind of created not only to provide housing, but also to act as a vessel, as a structure for the expression of community aspirations. And you can see in the image here, we're talking about things like participatory democracy, the exercise of power, the rights to the city. These are very much kind of broader conceptual underpinnings to the rationale for many CLTs. You may also often find CLTs in communities and areas which have been underserved by kind of the state and the market in housing provision. So areas where the state and the market has failed to adequately provide housing for underserved and marginalized communities. So, for instance, there is great interest at the moment in the use of CLTs and other community housing initiatives in England. Great interest in their use to benefit Black and minority ethnic communities, racialized minorities who are disadvantaged in the housing system. And this provides a potentially an alternative kind of approach to housing provision. So to move on and talk a little bit about kind of CLTs and regeneration. So, what can they offer to regeneration initiatives? So firstly, it's a challenge to the conventional logics that structure housing markets. Much regeneration in the past has often been critiqued for encouraging kind of private market kind of development and speculation. So CLTs imposing restrictions on the resale and lettings of homes to retain affordability and perpetuity might offer a way in which we can kind of safeguard affordable housing provision and safeguard it from those kind of global forces that may make housing unaffordable. It kind of rethinks the way in which homes are kind of planned, developed, and ultimately used as well. So with this really strong emphasis on active citizen and community participation. And it kind of also offers an opportunity to reframe participation. So often community participation can be associated with opposition to development that is proposed by external agencies and bodies, and that can and participation can be often articulated in that regard. Actually, CLTs are much more about a more propositional form of community leadership, actually articulating aspirations and visions for local neighbourhoods in regeneration contexts, rather than merely just opposing. It's an opportunity for communities to express what they do want to see happen. I should stress as well that these initiatives don't happen in isolation, as I'll mention shortly, but they do work in quite close partnership with professional agencies as well. And then finally, filling gaps and meeting needs that are met by the state and the market, and trying to provide these kind of broader set of community benefits, thinking quite holistically about how we plan neighbourhoods, how we plan housing, how we do regeneration, and to that end, CLTs are often taking quite a holistic view to planning their developments, not just thinking about the housing that's being built, but access to green space, access to communal space, and how communities and residents interact with one another really features quite strongly in a kind of co-design process. There are, of course, challenges associated with this. Firstly, it's quite well known that in the kind of voluntary sector and community sector, that volunteerism does involve kind of a really intensive process and really intensive demands on resources and knowledge and capacities of communities. So we can speak very effusively about the benefits of community participation, but we do also have to recognise that this can place quite a heavy burden on citizens and communities that may well be signing up and subscribing to the ideas of actively trying to change and shape their neighbourhoods and change and shape regeneration initiatives. But even still, there is still this kind of issue of community capacity and the extent to which that is kind of acknowledged in the funding that is available to support these initiatives. So high degrees of citizen leadership are important, but they can also be a challenge in terms of the ongoing sustainability. And this is where partnerships come in. So lots of community land trusts partner with professional agencies and organisations, often housing associations who are providers of social and affordable housing in England, who can provide some development and professional expertise. City and regional councils, authorities are also really important partners in facilitating community land trusts as well. While they are really important, it is also important to try and reconcile the provision of that kind of expertise, that provision of professional expertise, with the kind of commitment to community leadership. So finding that appropriate balance of power and decision making, ensuring that community leadership isn't crowded out as professionalization and institutionalization occurs. Funding is a kind of big issue. So this is often possibly one of the things you've been thinking of so far. Well, how are these initiatives actually funded? How do they build the homes that I pictured? How do they do regeneration? The government in England has previously had a dedicated community housing fund, for example. Unfortunately, that was kind of opened in 2016, but then closed a couple of years later, and has been very patchy, inconsistent kind of grant funding available to community initiatives. These community initiatives do also seek loan finance, social investment finance, where they borrow money. But again, that can be quite difficult to access unless it is given on favourable terms in terms of ongoing interest rates and so on. So there's a kind of inconsistency of funding frameworks. So these CLTs and community-led housing as the broader kind of body of kind of work that this sits within is acknowledged by the English government as an important part of diversifying housing and regeneration efforts, diversifying the providers of our homes. But there isn't really yet the kind of financial framework in place to make sure that can kind of proceed in a sustainable fashion. And then finally, access to land. So land is a scarce resource in cities. We can't create more of it. And it is often very competitive in terms of trying to access it. So CLTs are competing, with other providers, other agencies, other developers who are interested in using land for development. It's often a very high value resource. Obviously, this is also linked to the availability of funding as well. So CLTs have often been reliant upon kind of benevolent local landowners or benevolent public authorities who recognise the imbalance in power that community land trusts might have in trying to access land, but also the broader social and community value that could accrue through their use and development. But to begin to conclude on some more kind of positive notes, and the opportunities for CLTs in terms of regeneration. In terms of land, so some public authorities in England have begun to develop dedicated land disposal policies, dedicated for what we call community-led housing initiatives, of which CLTs and cooperatives and other forms of community leadership would sit within. So this recognition is really important. And these land disposal policies essentially ring-fence parcels of land for CLT development, which gives them a very kind of clear and accessible framework in which they can access land. They offer, there are significant opportunities associated with urban renewal. So about 10 to 15 years ago, we had a really kind of strong movement around kind of community leadership in renovating vacant properties, for example. That hasn't happened so much recently, but CLTs have a kind of an interest in that area and contributing to, tackling housing and property vacancy. But also perhaps in, we're talking about regeneration here, but we should also think about new developments as well. So in England, we're talking about creating new towns. And there's a bit of a debate around how we could embed principles of community ownership and stewardship into those new towns, those new developments. I think as well, CLTs in this, specifically in a regeneration context, have often emerged where regeneration has perhaps failed to deliver upon the promises that it was made. So we had quite a famous kind of regeneration initiative in England called Housing Market Renewal, which was essentially a long-term government regeneration project, which was unfortunately cut halfway through. So it was never actually fully completed. And actually, we've seen CLTs emerge in that context, trying to kind of continue and advance stalled and failed regeneration efforts of the past. There's also opportunities in relation to the engagement of, underserved communities. CLTs are often really actively engaged in the agenda around equalities, diversity and inclusion in our cities. And there are really strong international networks that enable kind of exchange and learning from good practice. So although this is very much about a kind of very localized neighborhood, a localized community, what's really fascinating is that actually many of these initiatives based in local communities in cities actually collaborate with initiatives in other cities around the world. And if you are interested in learning more about that, there's a couple of QR codes there. One publication there is around the global kind of development of community-led housing and those local exchanges, and another on equalities, diversity, inclusion in the English community-led housing sector. Thank you very much for listening. Look forward to the rest of the presentations and to any questions you might have later on.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was really very insightful in terms of CLTs in the UK. We just go on with our next presentation because I'm just mindful that we have a lot of interesting projects coming up. Now it's Valentina and Simone to present their case study about the ARIA project in Milan, Italy. Over to you, Simone and Valentina. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start linking up to what Thomas was saying earlier. Affordability of housing is a global challenge, and it's very key to understand who develops affordable housing and who controls and manages eventually affordable housing, and how the community can be brought in the process. And as it is a global challenge, it's interesting to learn from each other and understand how other places are addressing the issue, and how we can coordinate effort. And so moving to Milan, Milan has a glorious industrial past in the 20th century, and is now trying to reinvent itself for the 21st century. There's a lot of major projects going on, particularly looking at regenerating industrial assets within the city core. And it's in line with the new local plan that the city of Milan is developing, where growth is intended primarily as urban regeneration. This is very, very exciting for us, which are involved in urban regeneration. Milan is also part of the C40 cities network. I'm sure most of you will be aware of what this is. If not, go and take a look at the website. It's an amazing platform, an amazing network of cities. The main assumption is major cities have a major impact on the economy and on the impact we have on the planet, and therefore they must be at the forefront of developing, sustainable strategies and promoting sustainable growth. cities all around the world, including London. London, in fact, was one of the cities that initiated with Ken Livingstone, and now Major Khan initiated the process. The C40 networks acts as a lobbying entity and also as a coordination platform to promote, as I said, sustainable development, and it does it through what they call accelerators, which really are, the key principles that sustainable development should follow. Not just principles, but the C40 platform provides also an amazing source of a platform for sharing experience and sharing know-how between different cities. One of the ways the platform promotes urban regeneration is through their Inventing Cities competitions. Here are some of the examples of the competitions that are currently going on in Italy only, but there's other competitions that through the same model are going on all around the world. The idea is to link the public sector and the private sector and promote projects that not only are sustainable, but are meant to be beacons of sustainability, and therefore set up a precedent and teach to local authorities and also to the local industry how to create better projects and ultimately how to create better cities. And the project we want to present today, the project Aria in Milan, is one of these examples. And I hand over to Valentina, who has been following the project for the past 3-4 years.
Thank you, Simone. And I'll try to explain fast the project, even though my English is not so fluent, so maybe I will be a little bit slower than the other. Aria, the project is the winning project of the competition Reinventing Cities in Milan 2021. As you may see from the picture, the project was conceived by a large number of professionals. There were 4 subgroups and the team of developers, then the team of designers, the team that had to deal with social engagements and community engagement, and the team of technicians that had to produce the environmental challenges. This is a map of Milano, where you can see where the site is located in the eastern part of the site, next to the ring road. So it's quite near the city center, 15 minutes walk away from the city center of Milan. It's a big site for Milano. It's 15 hectares, and it is a dismissed productive area, bounded by a fence. So basically, it's a empty hall that let's say the industrial city left over. The picture shows also the other sites that are under renovation, which are the railway yards that have been longly discussed from all the architects in Milano, that they are now being redeveloped. So briefly, those are the boards that were submitted for the competitions. And this is just one picture that shows how, since the competition phase, the project had to be engaged with all the environmental issues and the life cycle assessments, and carefully take into consideration technologies to be adopted in order to reduce the carbon footprint of the project. This is a general overview of the it's a complex image actually that shows the sustainability framework that the project worked with, that goes through the international sustainability goals, the European taxonomy, and also local regulamentations, which is the regulamentation for air and climate in Milano, and had to produce several KPI that still are rules in the current phase of the project. So this is kind of a important statement that the team made and still is active in the project. This is just a few images from the competition. Then a little bit talking about the developers team. Of course, there were more than one developer, but the main one, the leading developer, was this B Corp, that is Redo. It's a benefit corporation that manages sustainable real estate and basically promotes social housing as a tool for urban regeneration. So the presence of this developer was really a strong guidance through the master plan and the urban planning phase that we are facing now. Yes, maybe I must say that the project we will show you is going under urban planning adoption. We are presented to the municipality the urban tool, so it's still a urbanistic project, and we are not making the project of the housing yet, but it is the general layout that will make it possible to realize all the housing and the other function. This is like the project manifesto, because ARIA comes from the environment, regeneration, inclusion, social inclusion, and architecture. And then I go through a quick overview of the site. The site is this in purple, and it is located it is located between a large productive area, which is the main food market of Milano. In the north sector, there is the flower and fish food market, and in the south, the agri-food general market of Milano. And former historical social housing settlement, because since the beginning of the 1900s, the municipality of Milano built social housing that were made really for the people that used to work in this wide productive sector of the city. Let's say that the hard part of the master plan was actually reading correctly the context, because the risk was to add a lot of social housing in a part of the city that already contains a lot of social housing settlement. So the risk was to worsen, to make the social impact of this area worse. So the big deal was to attract, to put attractive functions in the area, so that they can become the city attractors and regenerate the social fabric of the area in order to make possible to add new social housing. So basically, this context was what I think it was very important to explain to an audience that doesn't know the city and doesn't know the specific area itself. So just a brief introduction on the site. This is like the former productive area in the early 80s, with the city center in the background. And then there's a comparison with nowadays, where you can see that the area is already undergoing through transformation. Because it's already started the construction site, and also you can see that Milano has changed in the background. This is like an overview on this monumental industrial archaeology that is spread around the site, and also it's protected by the cultural heritage of Milano that listed 8 buildings to be preserved. Few more pictures of these beautiful buildings that the area is giving back to the city. And then we go briefly through the master plan, where basically the actions that the project took were breaking the enclosure, because right now the site still appears as an enclosed part, and breaking the boundary was very important in order to give back this area to the city, and also take it back as a new opportunity, create new path and a new public area. The area is completely car-free, so all the connections through the area are just pedestrian or cycle connection and are green connection, and also enhance the existing building, because we have quite large of number of buildings that are preserved and that will be let's say, refunctionalized with new functions, and we create a new centrality in the project. And then the new clusters that are structured around this very interesting heart of the project, made with a historical building and a big urban park. These are just some sketches from the project. And then maybe this is like a little bit of the program. The program and the main quantities to be placed on the area were given by the municipality through the town planning rules. So basically there are 120,000 square meters of gross floor area to be placed on the site. And the municipality decided that 50% of each, which means 60,200 square meters, needed to be social housing. So this tells us immediately that social housing is part of the program for regenerating the area. Another important thing is that the 30% of the surface of the site has to be released to the municipality as a public space. So this tells another important topic, the role of public within this private redevelopment. And then another thing is that the 20% of the area needs to be a green area. And this tells us a lot about sustainability and the need of doing something towards climate resilience. So these topics will be showed in the next slides. So this is a top view going back from the site the way it is. This is a top view that shows the redevelopment with the pre-existing building in the center, the big urban park, which is completely public, and the new clusters and new building built around in order to establish new urban relationship with the context and build a new part of the city.
Valentina, shall we have a quick look at the listed buildings and then jump on to the new clusters?
Yes, sure. Yes, this is like the breaking the enclosure. This is the way the site looked in the early 30s when it was built, and this is the way it looks nowadays, which means part of the task was breaking this enclosure and create new connections. And this is the listed building, which are basically in the center of the site. And there are 7 listed buildings which will host, let's say, public functions such as instructions and a museum and a school, nursery and kindergarten. This is just few images that show the regeneration and the change that the structure will have. It's a museum that will be hosted in the existing buildings. This is is a previous it's a previous cow
shed.
Yes, that will be transformed in a kindergarten. So this is part of the project we are developing. And the new cluster, of course, as you mentioned, Simone, that will define the new borders of this area and create a good interaction with the existing building and the rest, and where, let's say, most of the social housing will be hosted. Let me show you a picture of it. Okay, this is just the public space, exactly. I'll go through exactly. So most of the social housing will be in cluster 4 and cluster 5 in the percentage of 30,000 square meters in this area and 30,000 square meters in this area, but function will be mixed. There will be retail and common services at the ground floor, and also few housing of free market, because mixing functions is essential in order to create a good environment. And also the presence of green within all this housing will be a very important topic. So these pictures just show the mixture of functions and the typological mix. And there's going to be also a student house that will work together with the university building that will create an even nicer environment within the housing. This is a little bit of the study that has been made on the population, because let's say that it's obvious that the previous population was basically made of workers and families. So the new target for this intervention are young people and old people. Young people, because of course, with a big university coming there, there's need of housing for students. And also because this is what is lacking in the area at the moment. So to make a good project, we decided to produce a new kind of choice for also for housing. So cluster flats, elder housing for people, and so on. And then just a little bit of temporary use, because the role of public also helped us reactivating the site through the organization of cultural events and expositions that made the site vital again, as it was back in the 70s. As we saw in the pictures, the site is becoming vital now with this design exposition and art exposition that the municipality decided to organize within the site. And as Stantec, we also took part to this, and we made this exposition about the history and the memory of the site. And that's the end of my intervention.
Thank you very much, Valentina, and thank you, Simone. It seems to be a fantastic project in Milan. I'm sure people want to ask you quite a few questions. We've got already the first question coming in. Please don't hesitate to put in more questions under the Q&A box on the right-hand side, as I earlier mentioned. And we just swiftly move on to our next speakers, who is Adam Brennan. I briefly introduced him earlier. He will talk us through a bit about projects in Leeds. We are now jumping back to the UK for the next 15 minutes or so, and then for our last speaker will be in Canada. So over to you, Adam, and happy for you to go through what's happening in Leeds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philip, and great to be here to talk about Leeds on World Town Planning Day. So I'm Adam Brannan. I'm Head of Regeneration at Leeds City Council, and I am a chartered town planner. Part of my role is to support the scale, the quality and the choice of housing delivery in the city to meet our housing needs, and as part of our programmes of regeneration and place change. So hopefully I can give you a flavour of what that means in Leeds, some of the challenges that presents, and how we're trying to harness those as opportunities. So just a very quick primer for those of you who don't know Leeds. We are the third largest city in England, population of about 810,000 people, which has grown by around 100,000 people over the last 10 years. So we have grown and we are still growing. We're a very diverse city through immigration and settlement, and we are economically significant. We have a city economy of about £26 billion in a wider city region of West Yorkshire, which is about a £70 billion economy, which makes us the largest city region economy outside of London. So we have scale and we have kind of impact and importance for the country as a whole. We have particular specialisms in the knowledge sector, in professional services and digital, although our kind of long history is one of a manufacturing and engineering city. And so we have been through this process of deindustrialization and restructuring our economy, which colleagues in Milan reflected also in their city. So in many ways, we are a successful city, but beneath that, we have some real social and economic challenges. So the map on the left shows the spatial arrangement of the district, which is a main urban settlement bounded by outlying rural areas comprising Greenbelt and surrounding towns and villages. And on this, you can see that we've highlighted the high incidence and the significant spread of deprivation, particularly around the inner city of Leeds, marked in orange there, where we have around 200,000 people who live in the 10% most deprived parts of the country. And this very much informs our mission as a local authority, where we have a best city ambition to address poverty and inequality, which really informs everything we do. And we approach this through the three lenses of ensuring an approach that embodies health and well-being in our public health, that addresses the zero carbon challenge, and very much from the point of view of planning, regeneration and growth, making sure that is inclusive. So our spatial settlement pattern informs our approach to growth and planning, and for where we'll meet our growing housing needs for the city, utilising the built-up areas to focus development and harnessing the sustainability advantages of parts of the city that are, or have the potential to be, well connected by public transport and active travel, and which have access to neighbourhood services. And we've coined the phrase of complete, compact and connected places to characterise that. So what does housing in Leeds look like? Well, because we're a very diverse and broad-ranging district, in many ways our housing is like a microcosm of English housing as a whole. We have that diverse urban-rural geography, means we have a bit of everything across our stock of almost 400,000 homes in the district. And just as a snapshot here, just to give you a flavour, we have some of our estate regeneration schemes, which on the top left, which is about infill and kind of retrofitting our estates. To the top right there, an example of some of our emerging city centre high-rise living schemes. The city centre is increasingly a focal point for our residential development, although still only a relatively small part of the overall housing growth of the city. On the bottom right there, we have one of our contemporary city centre family housing schemes, which I'll be talking a little bit about a bit later. And then the bottom left is some of our unique 19th century legacy back-to-back housing, of which we still have about 19,000 in the city. And unfortunately, many of those represent some of the poorest housing stock probably in the country, which gives us some real challenges around kind of health and the kind of retrofitting requirements around that. So in terms of housing growth, it's incredibly important to us in the city. It's an economic driver in itself. It's a massive sector that employs many people in the development and supply chains. It underpins our investment and growth in our key employment sectors, helping to attract and retain talent. And it's critical to meeting the ongoing housing needs at all levels of the market. Over the last 5 years, we've delivered at scale right across housing sectors, such that we're responsible for around 1.5% of national housing supply in Leeds. And we've delivered more affordable housing than any other core city over that same period. And I think a lot of the success that represents is down to us being very plan-led. We've delivered much of that development on brownfield land, around 80%. And we're very proactive in unlocking land or delivering enabling infrastructure and working in partnership and collaboration with landowners and developers and investors and the community to make that happen. And then just looking at the kind of the broad sweep of the last 40 years, this just shows the housing completions in Leeds of that period. You can see last year there was actually our most successful year over that whole period. So we almost 4,500 homes were delivered in the city last year. And it's a measure of really the scale and the ambition that we have, that we're keen to keep that trajectory moving. And as we look at our housing pipeline, we have over 4,000 homes currently under construction. We have permissions, consented schemes that will represent over 30,000 homes coming forward. And then in the system, as live planning applications, over 5,500 homes. So the future looks pretty bright in that regard, as regards housing growth and delivering the numbers that we need in Leeds. However, I think, as has been alluded to in the presentations so far, it's all very well talking about housing numbers, but there is very much a crisis of affordability. And this graph is one of my favourites, because I think it really illustrates the issue very, very well. This is a graph that shows in the black line going across the median household income in Leeds, which is a shade over £30,000. And what that's illustrating is that for any household that has that median level of income, each of the bars that are shown represents a different tenure. And if the bar goes above that black line, then by government measures of affordability, that household cannot afford to access that particular tenure. So in effect, anybody who's kind of bang in the middle of the income spectrum in Leeds can only afford to access social rented housing or maybe shared ownership at the 25% share level. And then when you look at the dotted line, which is the lower quartile household income, then that picture gets even more extreme, with probably only social rent being accessible. There's another way of illustrating the affordability crisis in the city. So our local plan requires an annual delivery quantum of over 3,200 homes, of which 1,230 need to be affordable to meet our identified need. Now, last year was our best year for 15 years in delivering affordable homes. We delivered 665, so just over half that identified need. So very clear and stark differential there in terms of what is relative success in Leeds compared to the rest of the other cities in the country, but still well below what we need to deliver. And that delivery is through our through planning obligations on developers. It's through direct housing association developments, and it's our own council housing growth programme. But you can see from the stats there that we have over 26,000 people on the households on the housing register who are in some form of housing need, and over 5,000 of those are in acute housing need. So we are very much in the midst of a crisis. So housing growth and choice are really critical to our growth as a city. We work very closely across our kind of local authority city development functions through planning and regeneration, and with housing, land, property and community interests to plan for where and how we can deliver this to meet our needs. And I'll focus now a bit on our ambitions for city centre growth and regeneration. So we very much focus on inclusive growth and how our very successful city centre, with all those kind of great knowledge economy employers and the fantastic retail and the leisure offer that it provides, can be part of our solution to our housing needs. So we recognise that it's got a great attraction to investment in high quality mixed use led schemes. And I look out my window here on the 10th floor and I can see that we've got cranes on the horizon representing the kind of a record in terms of the pipeline and the activity on the ground. But at the same time, we need to ensure that we connect this investment and this success to that ring of more deprived neighbourhoods that surround it, which are illustrated on the image on the right-hand side. And when we talk about connectivity, we mean that in the physical sense, but we also mean it in terms of the economic and the social impact that growth and that opportunity should have for those people living in some pretty challenging conditions. So Leeds city centre is physically very constrained by a ring of disconnection, really, formed by legacy 19th and 20th century transport infrastructure and poor quality, largely unplanned urban realm. And our aim is to punch through this to enable city centre growth, but to enable that opportunity for those surrounding communities. Earlier this year, we worked with very closely with national government to set out our vision for this, focusing on 6 city centre growth zones and promoting a kind of cross-government, cross-departmental, whole-place approach to policy and investment. And our transformational regeneration vision is developing regeneration frameworks in each of those areas, each of those growth zones, setting out how housing, transport and the economy can be coherently planned and delivered together to effect that inclusive, sustainable urban regeneration. And national government is working very closely with us on this because of the scale of the prize and the nationally significant investment that's potentially in play. So within this kind of area of growth, we're looking at 30 to 40,000 new homes, a hugely important redevelopment and resilience investment to Leeds railway station, which connects us to the region and the rest of the country. The first 2 lines of a new West Yorkshire mass transit network that will come together in this space, and in economic terms, bringing all that together, the challenge to uplift our economic productivity to the national average, which has the potential to deliver around 3.5 billion of extra GVA to the national economy. So government's really interested in helping us deliver this. With a particular focus on housing within that space, this image shows our existing pipeline of sites at various stages of planning and development. And you can see possibly that there's around 30,000 homes within that pipeline, about 10% of which would be affordable homes, although that's always a number that we're looking to push and stretch through the use of various kind of public sector finance and unlocking tools. But we think that through more transformational place investments and the culmination of the work that I've just referred to, we think we can probably unlock a lot more than that, and probably more than 40,000 homes altogether, but which will require significant investment in infrastructure, public realm, placemaking, and in land assembly. So yeah, housing is really underpinning and driving a lot of our kind of intentional regeneration and growth activity in the centre of the city. I thought I would just finish with 3 case studies, which hopefully illustrate our intent in this regard. The first one is a development by the Guinness Trust at Points Cross, which is midway through the development, and it'll be the first genuinely scaled mixed 10-year city centre development that we'll have seen for many, many years. Over 900 homes in total, but a third of them will be affordable homes, and that'll be affordable rent and shared ownership. And that's required an awful amount of work in terms of working across public sector organisations and bringing the funding together, and having a really dedicated, ambitious and committed housing association partner in the Guinness Trust to make this happen. But what we'll see there is the development of, to all intents and purposes, a really high quality, high profile city centre residential scheme that will be 10-year blind. And this is really kind of setting the standard and the expectation for what we want to see in the city. The second example to give you is around Ayr Park, which you can see the middle image there, a large area of brownfield derelict land, around 9.7 hectares in total. It was the site of the former Tetley Brewery, which was kind of the synonymous brewer with Leeds for many, many years. That closed and relocated, and it was acquired by the developer Vastint, which is the property arm of the IKEA group. And Vastint have been really kind of forward-thinking in their approach. They responded very positively to our planning brief for the site in bringing forward a major mixed-use development, which will incorporate 1,400 new homes, but centred on what will be the largest new city centre green space in the country, a new 3.5 hectare park. And we complemented and enabled that through our work at the adjoining Meadow Lane, which was one of our Greater Green projects, converting highway land and car parking to green space, and creating a development plot with that as well to enable some new affordable housing delivery. So we've seen this very significant kind of mindset and cultural shift in the city centre, taking out highway space and moving to a much greener, infrastructure-led and affordable approach to regeneration. And then the final example that I just wanted to leave you with was the Climate Innovation District, developed by a company called Situ, which is a pioneering development of a new net zero community, using their own kind of cutting edge off-site manufacturing process, which is delivering passive house standard development. It's promoting multi-generational living, and it's bringing family housing to the city centre for the first time in generations. So when we talk about numbers, we also talk about quality, we also talk about choice, and you know, 3 schemes there that I hope have given you an understanding of the kind of ambition we have. Yeah, I hope that's given you a flavour of our housing challenges and how we are addressing these through our regeneration programme.
Thank you very much, Adam. That's really great to hear from Leeds. Not far off. I'm based in Sheffield, by the way, so greetings to you, and really great to see those 3 examples coming forward, and hopefully many more sites and homes during the next few years. We are quickly going over to our last speaker, who is Hugh Nguyen from the Canadian, she's a Canadian professional planner, as I said, and she will briefly talk about the Le Breton Master Concept Plan. I will hand over to you, Hugh. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Philip, and thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here to celebrate World Town Planning Day with planners from around the world. I want to speak a little bit about my work at the National Capital Commission. It's one of its prominent sites under redevelopment known as Le Breton Flats in Ottawa, Ontario. One moment here. Before we dive into the housing case study at Le Breton Flats, I want to give a brief overview of the National Capital Commission, the Le Breton Flats Master Concept Plan, and what is the Building Le Breton project, which I work directly on and exclusively. Then I'll speak about the first market offering that the master plan delivered that focused on affordable housing, which we refer to as the library parcel, and then details about the successful proposal by Dream Le Breton, the case study itself. For those of you who have been to Ottawa before, you probably have seen a lot of the National Capital Commission work, which I'll refer to here on in as the NCC. If you skated on the Rideau Canal or hiked in Gatineau Park, these are managed assets by the NCC. It's an arm's length federal crown agency created by Parliament in 1959, but its first predecessor was created in 1899 with the mandate to make the capital a beautiful city and worthy to be the place that houses the national government. The NCC is the largest landowner in the region, includes areas in both the city of Ottawa in Ontario and the Ville de Gatineau in Quebec, thus owning lands on both sides of the river in 2 provinces and making it the national capital region. The NCC owns the light green areas shown on the map, and the dark green areas are other lands owned by other federal entities. The 3 main functions of the NCC is 1, being the long-term planner of federal lands. So any development on federal lands, including our own lands, must go through a design and land use approval. It's probably best known for its preservation of public parks and green spaces. The NCC manages amazing capital parks. And where my department is based within, doing responsible and high quality development of their lands. The NCC owns a large vacant site just west of the downtown. You can see the Peace Tower in the distance. It's 29 acres in size. That's 29 hectares in size, which is 71 acres. And this area is known as Le Breton Flats. If you have been to the Canadian War Museum, it's located just to the north side of Le Breton Flats along the river. This used to be a thriving working class industrial community in the 1800s. It was settled even before the city of Ottawa became a city. It was supported by the logging and rail industry due to its proximity to the river. However, the Jacques Robert Plan of 1950 called for urban renewal, which meant the removal of what was considered slum areas. And this occurred across Canada and the US, and really it was a dark time in urban planning. Residents and businesses were given expropriation notices in 1962, and the lands were completely cleared, as you can see in these 2 comparison photos that are just over a decade in between. The area was going to be a new federal campus, but the project was later canceled and most of Le Breton Flats has been vacant since. There have been many different plans for Le Breton Flats over the decades, and often I will hear, will Le Breton Flats really get developed this time? It was actually fairly close in 2018, 2019. An agreement was put in place to sell the lands to a joint venture, but the relationship between the 2 main parties turned sour to the point where they were suing each other in court that the NCC decided to cancel the project. The redevelopment of Le Breton Flats became a corporate priority, and we moved ahead quickly with a special project team named Building Le Breton, where I became team member number 4 as the planner. The lesson learned from this failed bid that there was a high risk in putting the complete development responsibility to one entity, where there was no longer, oh, sorry, I think my slides are moving here. Let's go back, there we go. to put the complete responsibility to one entity. And so when they no longer got along, this put the whole project in jeopardy. Therefore, the NCC decided to change course and become the master developer, strategically deciding when to release the lands in phases, such that if one phase failed, it wouldn't affect the launch of another phase, and this allowed for flexibility in the market conditions. The red dashed line represents the master concept plan area. In order to guide the development at LeBreton Flats, we undertook a major public consultation process to reimagine LeBreton, as the last master plan was from 1997. It was a 2-year process, and it was led by our consultant team, O2 Planning and Design, and the master concept plan was approved by the NCC Board of Directors in April 2021. The MCP represents a vision for LeBreton Flats to be an ambitious, sustainable mixed-use community and a capital destination in Canada with bold goals for housing, mobility, sustainability, parks, and public realm. Some key aspects of the plan are the high percentage in parks and green space, that's 43% of the total area, having good active transportation connectivity throughout the site and taking advantage of the 2 LRT stations shown by the pink areas on the plan, and having a dedicated site for a downtown arena or major event center that's shown by the orange kind of square shape on the map, and also the removal of a planned arterial road and replacing it with a cycling and pedestrian bridge, and also being a zero carbon community supported by a district energy system. There are minimum affordable housing requirements, 25% overall, and family units, 15%. The overall build-out of the area is estimated to be 20 to 30 years. On your screen, you'll see our phasing plan that shows 3 overall phases, with each color representing a decade. The red parcels represent the early phase, the first decade plan for development. I'll be speaking to parcels A9 and A10 soon as the case study, as it's the first phase that was put to market under the MCP. The purple parcels are intended for development in the second decade, and the third phase is shown by the teal color, which are known as opportunity sites, sites that could be developed now if there's attractive conditions to do so, or if not, it'll be done in the 20 to 30-year timeframe. In terms of the overall scale, the MCP can accommodate 6,000 residential units and 520,000 square meters of gross floor area. Each parcel has a permission for at least 1 tower that ranges from 20 to 40 stories. In terms of financing, the NCC can't borrow money as a government entity, so the revenue that gets collected from land sales or land leases is put back into the Building LeBreton project and invested into the public realm, which is fairly costly, as this whole area is a large contaminated brownfield site. So I apologize for this busy map, but the main reason I want to show it is that the yellow area is the MCP area, and you can see that the Canadian War Museum is labeled just to the north of it, and the dark orange area is the library parcel site. It's called that because it's next to the new Central Library and Archives that's currently under construction. And again, the library parcel is the first phase of development under the MCP. This market offering is actually in partnership with the NCC and the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. You might hear of it as CMHC, and that's Canada's National Housing Agency, and the project was delivered through its Federal Land Initiatives program. So the program purchases federal lands that can support residential development and then offers it to the market at a discounted price for commitments in social and affordable housing outcomes. As the NCP was new, the NCC really wanted to ensure that the plan's aspirations were being met, and that's why the NCC led the marketing of the RFQ and the RFP. We launched the request for qualifications at the end of 2020, and 3 teams were shortlisted for the RFP. The land price was set at $30 million. So the NCC would receive this amount of money from CMHC. And so I think that's about equivalent to 17 million pounds. We asked for proposals that were committed to a strong level of affordability, zero carbon design and operations, excellence in design and architecture, benefits for the Algonquin Nation, and community benefits such as employment for equity-seeking groups and on-site amenities and services. There was a minimum number of units required in a proposal that was set at 600, with at least 30% being affordable. What was being competed in the RFP was really the development proposal, social outcomes, and the level of affordability. It was not about price or the highest financial bid. The successful proponent was comprised of the developer Dream and Multi-Faith Housing, which is a not-for-profit housing provider. The design team was led by KPMB Architects and Perkins & Will and supported by 2 Ray Architects for Indigenous Design. I'll just linger a moment on this slide so you can take a look at the proposal. The proposal itself was called Dream Le Breton, and it's comprised of 2 towers of 30 to 35 stories and with a 4-story terrace podium. So some details about the proposal. It contains 601 units. It now contains 608 units after going through detailed design. They'll all be rental units ranging from studio to 3 bedrooms. There are 247 affordable units, so that's 41%, so much greater than the 30% minimum requirement. And 31% will meet the accessibility standards, where the requirement was 20%. 130 of the affordable housing units will be owned by Multi-Faith Housing. Those units will be affordable in perpetuity. 117 of the affordable housing units will be owned by the developer Dream, and they have a duration of 55 years, where the minimum requirement was 25 years. The units will support a wide range of target populations, including Algonquins and Indigenous people, women and children, veterans, new Canadians, and adults living with cognitive disabilities, with on-site support services provided through Multi-Faith Housing. So the 2 towers are shown here through a model labeled as East and West Tower. The affordable units in the West Tower are integrated with the market units in a checkerboard approach. They provide a variety of housing options throughout the building. All the units within this building will be the same layout, whether they're affordable or the market units. So the affordable units are shown in the yellow and tan colors, and the market units are shown in the red and rose color shading in the West building, as well as in the East building. And in the East building, the green units are owned by the not-for-profit housing provider, Multi-Faith Housing. They're shown in dark green and light green, with the dark green units representing the 3-bedroom family units in the podium. The blue and light blue areas show the common areas, the daycare, the renewable energy facility, the retail, and the community hubs on the ground level. The proposal provided many public benefits, including high-quality public realm, retail and services, and amenities on site. There are parkettes, multi-use pathways, a gathering circle, community uses, and a bike shop. And these really responded to the Le Breton Flats Master Concept Plan policies. The programs that will be part of the building's operations, although they will evolve over time, they're expected to include after-school programming and tutoring for kids, adult community skills classes, breakfast and reading clubs, community fitness classes, as well as a community kitchen. There is a high degree of sustainability features in the proposal. The RFP required that the proponent certify to the Canada Green Building Council's zero carbon building standard for design and construction. Dream has committed to go beyond these requirements, also certifying to LEED goals for new construction and new neighborhood development, and also meeting the requirements of the One Planet Living framework. The sustainability plan for the project relies on turning heat from the sewers into energy. The library parcel is ideal because there are 3 major sewers running beneath the site. The wastewater energy transfer system will be publicly available from an at-grade viewing window and be used for public education and engagement. There are broader benefits for the Algonquin Nation, as well as community, local, business, and workforce benefits as priorities in the RFP. For the Algonquin Nation Benefits Plan, DREAM has identified 5 priority areas shown on the slide, and they include specific commitments and targets to ensure that the Algonquin Nation is involved in the development from design to occupancy. In terms of local economic development, DREAM has leveraged its buying power through contracts and hiring to prioritize creating economic benefits for equity-seeking groups and local businesses. Fast forward to today, 2024, DREAM LeBreton has started construction. The municipal and federal approvals are in place, and it's anticipated to start occupancy in early 2027. We monitored DREAM's commitments through annual progress reports, as well as the delivery of the affordable housing is tied through the financing through CMHC. So if they don't meet it, they need to pay back the grants and the low interest loans. The photo on the top shows the construction of the new central library next door, which is anticipated to open in 2026. So if you're planning to visit Ottawa, come in a couple years, as there'll be a lot of new and exciting developments at LeBreton Flats. So really, LeBreton Flats is in the process of reinventing itself. We're honoring its past. In the last few years, we have opened up the site with new public realm projects to make them more publicly available. And for the future, we're implementing the master concept plan over the next 20 to 30 years. For me, it's been very exciting to work on this project, and I strongly feel that this is the time it will indeed get redeveloped. If you're interested in learning more about LeBreton or the NCC, I provided some references on the slide. Thank you so much for your time, and happy to take questions if there is time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugh. It was very insightful about the LeBreton Flats. I'm sure there will be questions, and there are questions already. If the other speakers could join us as well, that would be really great. Maybe Hugh will make a start with yourself, if that's all right. Because there were already questions for you there. Just have a look. There was a question from Ivor O'Connor. Thanks for the presentations. Apologies if I missed. What is classified as affordable housing for the LeBreton scheme? Is this a percentage of net income? It's just missed. A net income, a set rent on the market rent, or other measures? And I think that question is really helpful right at the start, because if we think about all our presentations this morning, affordability is basically a golden thread which runs through all the presentations. And maybe if speakers could just briefly clarify and define and tell the audience what affordability means in their respective countries, I think that would be very much appreciated. Thanks.
Thanks, Philip. I would love to make this an easy answer, but I feel like living in the city of Ottawa, we have federal and municipal jurisdictions. And so I would say there's no clear definition, but I think the rule of thumb is the 30% of your disposable income is used for affordable housing. In the case of this project, it was based on median market rent. So just for an example, the multi-faith housing initiatives, their affordable housing unit is no more than 59% of the median market rent, and DREAM's affordable housing units is no more than 79% of the median market rent. So really on the other side, we speak of median market rent versus household income. And I would say in the master concept plan, we're very flexible with the definition, so we can take advantage of different financing programs and go by the definition of who we're partnering with.
Cheers. Thanks. Adam, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, should I come in and try and answer that from an English planning perspective? I mean, there are numerous definitions of affordable housing in the National Planning Policy Framework. Perhaps just to break it down to kind of three kind of simplistic versions of saying this. So social rent is the most affordable housing in the country, and that is a rent that is generally set at a level with reference to the lowest quartile income in that place. So that's the absolute entry point into housing. Affordable rent. So social rent is a form of affordable rent, but there's a formal definition of affordable rent, which can be anything up to 80% of the market rent in that particular place. And then, without getting too much more complicated, there are things like shared ownership. So that is where a resident can buy a share of the property, but continues to pay rent also, generally to a housing association. But again, that's a cheaper way of getting on the ladder.
Thanks. Simone, Valentina, do you want to add to that from an Italian perspective?
Simone, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, yeah, we can't hear you. Double check.
Maybe you have the headphones plugged.
Unfortunately not, no. Valentina, do you want to join in, maybe, or?
Yeah, basically, following what Adam was saying, most of the affordable housing in Milan are for rent, and those rents are established by the municipality itself, which gives a level of affordability. And of course, the question is tricky right now because the market right now, construction market has risen very much. So also building all this new affordable housing will have the bad impact of the rising of construction prices. So we have no updates right now about the price of those affordable housing in terms of rent or for the few quantity that is on sale. But for sure, it is a little bit of a problem that is underscoring the project itself right now. And it's one of the problems why the project has been delayed also.
Yeah, thanks. Simone, does it work for you again? Oh no. Oh no, that's really unfortunate. Maybe if you try to log in again or double check you. In the meantime, Valentina, there were a few questions for you as well. If I may have a look at those. There was one question from Joanne Rosa. Images look really beautiful. How will ARIA be connected to the main Milan city center? Will there be new walking and cycling routes, or is there a train station within the new community?
Of course, there will be plenty of new bikes routes and pedestrian routes, and part of the, let's say, part of the realization of those new routes is part of the project itself. The developer is giving to the municipality new adjustments for all the infrastructure all around the site and also towards the city center. And that's a way that it's used by the municipality in Italy, that instead of paying for the rights of building, you pay with works. Public works for the city in order to upgrade connections and infrastructures. And also, I didn't say it in the presentation, there's a stop of the fast train. It is not the subway, it's like a city line that runs through Milano and goes outside Milano, and the stop is right in the northwest corner. So that gave us all the hint to create a car-free district and to use public transportation as much as we could.
Well, that's great, yeah, cool. Also, another question for you was from Belinda, who was asking about the green space provision and the species. What species of tree will be proposed close to buildings, and who will manage the green space? By the way, your English is very good.
No. There for the species, we have, of course, the landscape architects that are taking care of it. We are trying to use species from Milano and from the area itself, and we're trying to preserve as many trees as we can, even though the area is going under si vuole bonifiche, come si dice?
Remediation.
Under strong remediation, because of course it was a productive site and we need to put schools and housing. So it's the level of the highest level of remediation. So we are trying to preserve as much as we can of the green, and we will put new species, but trying to use the ones that were there. And the the developer will take care of the maintenance of the green and all the open spaces for 30 years. And this is part of the deal that he made with the municipality. So the old big park that is 30,000 square meters will be realized, built, given to the city, to the municipality, will become full public property, but still the developer will take care of it for 30 years.
Great, thank you. There was one question from Kevin Hilson. Now, I don't know for sure if that was directed for the ARIA project as well, because he asked the question, which organizations, e.g. government, local council, companies, etc., provide the startup and longer-term finance for the proposed residential and other redevelopment and regeneration. Unfortunately, it doesn't say which project. I assume it would be for ARIA as well, but I'm not 100% sure. If speakers have,
we can answer for ARIA, and but then if you know, if we have interesting answers
do
from
that,
others as well.
Great, yeah.
For the ARIA project, and that's common to all the Reinventing Cities project, it's actually very interesting, because one of the reasons why the Reinventing Cities platform has been set is in order to match together public intervention and private intervention and make them work together. So already at the stage of the competition, not at the very first stage, but at the second stage of the competition, you have to come up with a viable financial plan for the project, meaning that already at the competition stage, you have to have willing investors to suggest what type of development model and what type of development finances they will put in place. And it is a combination of different private investors. In the case of ARIA, we have REDO, which is an operator of social housing, together with the European Design Institute, which is a cultural institution, together with other parties. So it's several different parties, all coordinating their effort and together with obviously also investment from the local authority side. So it's a coordinated effort, and it's one of the core elements of this type of interventions.
Hugh, do you want to add to that from your perspective?
Yes, I was just thinking in terms of our RFP process. So it really was federal monies. So CMHC gave the NCC money for the lands, but then they used the land for leverage in the RFP. So since we had high affordable housing requirements, it almost forced a partnership between a developer and a not-for-profit entity. So all the three shortlisted proponents each had a not-for-profit proponent.
Thank you. I'm mindful of time. It's already 12 noon in UK time. I take on the last two questions, if that's all right. Adam, I've got one question for you from Maria. How much of the recent housing growth in Leeds is student accommodation? What role does this play in the broader regeneration?
Yeah, the student housing growth is really prominent in the city centre, because we've got still a growing student population, and it's a new highly investable asset class in the country, but which is starting to pop up in cities right across university cities right across the country. And because of the development economics and the occupational model and the funding model, it tends to be able to develop at quite high scale. So some of the taller buildings that we're seeing developed, very prominent, very visible, are purpose-built student accommodation. And so there is, I think, a big perception that there is too much of that happening in the city centre, and it's at the expense of other uses. But I think the delivery to date has been probably in the single-figure percentages of our overall delivery. But there is a significant pipeline of about 20% of the kind of permissions that are in process now are probably for student accommodation. Now, not all of those will necessarily come forward, because getting planning is no guarantee of the scheme happening. It is it's a stage in the process. But yeah, it's a growing investment class. In terms of the benefits of that, I mean, it supports further education as a massive export for the city. Students expect now much higher quality accommodation than perhaps certainly I was used to, which was a room in a knackered old terrace house. So I think student requirements are changing. There'll be a tipping point soon when I think student accommodation in city centres will start to be the go-to choice, and it'll start to free up some of those houses in multiple occupation that have been the traditional locations for student accommodation.
Thank you very much, Adam. Tom, last question for you. What are the distinctions between CLTs and housing association, particularly in terms of governance?
Yeah, thank you. So I think one of the interesting things is that CLTs and housing associations in England actually often share similar or the same kind of legal and regulatory kind of organizational forms. So both organizations which, at the heart have a social purpose and reinvest any profits into the business or other kind of broader community benefit. But I think in terms of, for example, board management and governance in that regard, it's difficult to give a uniform answer because every CLT is different, but broadly speaking, I would say there's just a stronger emphasis on kind of representation of the local community in the kind of structure of the board. CLTs in the United States, where the model originated, have a kind of ideal type of a board, of a kind of governance structure, as being a third of the seats on a board would be reserved for residents of the homes. A third would be reserved for members or representatives of the local community, including local businesses or other community organisations, and a third for public authorities or other relevant kind of professionals. But there is incredible diversity because CLTs in England at the moment are still relatively new and still kind of relatively immature, and I don't think there's necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach.
Thank you very much, Tom. Mindful of the time, this leaves me just wrapping up our webinar. Unfortunately, it was super interesting. I think we heard so much about different projects, case studies, and very good initiatives, basically going forward in terms of affordable homes, social housing as well, regeneration. So I think that was very insightful. Thank you very much again to you, Tom, Adam, Simone, Valentina, and Hugh. Thanks a lot for your time, and thanks for sharing your thoughts and projects with us today. I just wanted to say, please do get involved on Twitter and follow us on @RTPI_Yorks and tell us what you think about the webinar. Please also complete the RTPI survey that will appear once the webinar finishes. And after this session, we will provide you with a link to the recorded webinar. And then for details of upcoming webinars and events for the rest of 2024, please visit rtpi.org.uk/events. Thank you very much for attending today. Thank you very much for our speakers to be with us and sharing their thoughts and projects. Thank you very much to all of you. Cheers and happy World Town Planning Day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great
Bye.
day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.